Good morning. Morning is a horrible time to talk about justice, but I think it serves as a wake up call to the other lectures. I'm going to speak about the idea of cognitive justice, and I'm going to begin with two stories. I think one of the things I found fascinating is that childhood is often the source for great concepts. I was born in the steel town of Jamshedpur, and one of the things we really enjoyed was the forests around it. Every evening, there used to be a spectacle. The Tata Steel plant would unroll its slag in a mountain of almost technocratic steel. Half an hour later, the Dalma Hills would go up in flames as the tribals practiced shifting cultivation, Joom, as it was then called. We used to watch it as children with fascination. And my father would watch it with equal awe. And then he would tell us, as long as both systems survive, as long as the balance is maintained, justice exists. One without the other would be intolerable. We didn't understand the wisdom of my father, but like most intuitive concepts, we had a sense of the relation between knowledge, democracy, and justice. Years later, as I was working in Gujarat, a group of tribal leaders came to me. Some of them were also from other groups. And they asked me, "You work on science?" I said, I pleaded guilty. And they said, "Can you do something for us? Can you arrange a meeting between our ojas, our healers, our ethno-psychiatrists, as you call them, with Western psychologists and doctors?" And they said, one of them who was a bit more cosmopolitan turned around and said, "And don't give me any of the JNU subaltern or the World Bank participation. We want a meeting of citizens of knowledge. We want a dialogue of epistemic systems." I was stunned by the notion of concepts. In fact, the man turned around and said, "We need a new knowledge of democracy. We need a democratization of knowledge systems. Can you help us? Can you create a concept for it?" I thought for a while and coined the idea of cognitive justice, the right of different forms of knowledge to exist as long as they sustain the myths and livelihood of a people. Unfortunately, the 2002 riots put a stop to anything there. But it began working on this concept because to a certain extent we realized that democracy had black box knowledge and science. We needed to open up knowledge and science as drama, as theater in an everyday democracy for us to reinvent a new democratic system. I think Alfred Wallace, the evolutionist, put it brilliantly. Years before, in his book, The Wonderful Century, he said, "A science at its moment of domination becomes hegemonic. Science has to always invent alternatives because it's the alternative, it's the plural, it's the dialogic that keeps science alive as a knowledge system." And I think this point was brought out brilliantly by my friend Ziauddin Sardar in an article. He was talking about the right to health in England. Zia is a Muslim, a British citizen. And he began with saying, "As a citizen, I'm entitled to the entry to the medical health system. But as a Muslim, I have the right to my own notions of body, my own notions of death, my own ideas of healing and health. Cognitive justice has to combine the political economic with the ethically epistemic." And I think this became the fascinating search for many of us. And I think this problem came out in a more acute form at the ground level. While the state celebrates science, activist groups, voluntary groups, community groups talk about a dialogue of knowledges. And this point came out brilliantly about a year and a half ago at a small village in Hyderabad called Chirala. It was a meeting between weavers, 1,000 of them, and historians of technology and science from Germany and other parts of Europe. The meeting began in the same stiff, starched way. All the white men stood and sat in chairs. The weavers sat on the ground. And for the first 1 week, nothing happened. It was stalemate. In fact, it was just stale. Suddenly, one of the Dutch scholars, V.B. Bijker, said, why don't we all sit in a circle? Why don't we all sit on the ground? And suddenly there was a thawing of relationships. There was an unfreezing of body languages. And for the first time, the weavers started talking. They brought in the looms, and suddenly they felt like theoreticians and experts. It was at that moment that one of the activists there turned around to a great historian and said, you not only robbed us of our life and livelihood, you robbed us of our theory. We need a return to theory. The defeated and vulnerable must reclaim theory, because the right to theory is a right to life and livelihood. That's what cognitive justice embodies. To a certain extent, what we are trying to say is that a knowledge system is not an abstract system. It links to life, life worlds, livelihood, lifestyles, and life chances. And one of the first things you have to guard against here is a right against obsolescence. I think this thing was caught beautifully in the Indian national movement when the great art critic Ananda Kumaraswamy turned around and said the Indian national movement must start a guerrilla war against the museum, because the museum smells of death and formaldehyde. If God were to return today and ask Western man where the Aztecs, Incas, and Aborigines were, would he take him to a museum? A museum smells of death and formaldehyde. It smells of defeated knowledges. And it smells of a humanism which lacks the ethics, the failure to acknowledge the genocide of defeated knowledges. And that's what we're really interested in. How do you sustain the diversity of knowledges? Means, how do you sustain the diversity of lifestyles? Madhav Garg put it brilliantly once. He said, you can't say 150,000 varieties of rice through science. You need myth, you need folklore, you need housewives who can dream differently. Cognitive justice caters to the knowledge systems beyond science. It speaks of their equality. It speaks of their plurality. And to a certain extent, what it fights against is the right against obsolescence. What we're reviving here is the theory of memory. Modernity has a false theory of memory. It believes oral memory is rote, but actually oral memory is inventive. The old bards could remember 10,000 lines of poetry, not by repeating it in rote, but by inventing it and reinventing it. Memory was reinvention. And this is really what we have to understand. How do you bring orality back into the imagination? How do you bring plurality back into the imagination? How do you bring new words into an imagination which doesn't allow for ethnosciences? You talked of them contemptuously as jugaad, as coping, as something exotic, as something defeated. I think it's in this context that the Indian democratic movements, starting with Narmada, starting with Bhopal, starting with Chipko, worked out a different imagination. The first thing they pointed out is we have to rescue the Constitution. In terms of a scientific imagination, our Constitution, enlightened as it is an illiterate document. First thing, our Constitution doesn't exist in multiple time. Since it exists in linear time, the tribal, the peasant, and the nomad have no chance of survival. Development is erasure, which is why India today has more refugees from development projects than from all the wars we have fought. How do we meet this? And it's in this context we first proposed to the Constitutional Reform Committee that India exists in multiple time. That India today, there's no such thing as linearity. There are multiple futures, there are plural futures, because they're plural forms of storytelling. The tribal is as much an embodiment of the future as any industrialist. The second point I want to emphasize here is nature has to be brought back into the Constitution. The Western idea of nature is Judeo-Christian. But science is only a resource. Science, nature is only a commodity. For us, nature is dream, it's myth, it's storytelling, it's ecology. To bring nature back into the Constitution, William O. Douglas had a brilliant suggestion. He talked about the rights of every ecosystem to be represented in the Constitution. Just as you have rights, every ecosystem, from a mountain to a river, has the rights of representation. Look, this has to be done carefully. You can't do it BJP style, where you only select the Ganges for representation, and it sounds like a PWD department. It needs imagination. Our constitution is suffering from mediocrity. The second point I want to bring out here very carefully is you need the idea of a tacit constitution. You see, our constitution is based on a Western idea of logos. But if you look at it, every constitution needs an unconscious. We need an unconscious of civilizations. We need an unconscious of time. We need different notions of the body, different ideas of nature. You see, you can't sustain diversity if you don't have 1,000 languages. I mean, let's take a very simple idea of what cognitive justice can do. Imagine if every school were to sustain one dying language, one dying graft, one dying species. Cognitive justice is a way of fighting genocide and extinction. But for that, you need a different kind of language. You need a different kind of memory. So what I want to suggest here is we experiment with the Constitution in a different way. And one of the things we are proposing now is a new set of knowledge panchayats. Just as you have your TED sessions, we have about 1,000 knowledge panchayats. Jairam Ramesh came close to it during the debates on biotechnology. We invite the housewife, we invite the peasant, we invite the multinational, we invite the scientists. They dialogue with each other. And they dialogue not in the language of science, but in the language of the housewife. You talk about food, you talk about expectations, you talk about anxiety, you talk about dreams, you talk about recipes. You need a different kind of language. And language is something central that we have to rescue. English is too well behaved to understand diversity. You need a different kind of constitution. And it's in this context that I'm coming back to my original point. Our democracy is desiccated by majoritarianism, desiccated by COVID, desiccated by technocracy. Democracy needs a new kind of imagination, a new kind of folklore. And it's in this context that we're suggesting the idea of cognitive justice, a new kind of theater, a new kind where concepts dance, where ideas dream, and dream in terms of diversity. There is no one solution to the problem. Democracy always is multiple, is futuristic. And it's in this context that cognitive justice becomes a new theater for democracy. It's not about votes. It's not about representation. It's about keeping imaginations alive. So the future of democracy and livelihoods are kept alive. Thank you.